Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Hope you had a terrific 4th of July. It's a day worth celebrating. Despite what you may read day in and day out, this is still a great country. Where else are you going to go that's better? Nowhere. America's still full of happy, decent, independent-minded people. The attitudes of our leaders may have changed dramatically in recent years, and they have, but the virtues of our population have not changed. That's the good news. The bad news is the people in charge are working hard to make Americans hate our own country. If you made the mistake of going online this weekend, you saw them pouring out their misery on social media. Instead of enjoying hot dogs and fireworks with the kids they don't have, they were on Twitter yelping about slavery and white supremacy and what a terrible place the United States is. It's easy to ignore people like this. You just turn off your screen and then go live your life. Unfortunately, it is much harder to shield your children from them. That's the problem. Case in point, last week, the largest teachers union in the country, the National Education Association, announced that its new and first priority is making anti-American indoctrination, race-based indoctrination, mandatory in every classroom in the country. All K through 12 schools, the union declared, must teach children that, quote, white supremacy, anti-blackness, anti-indigeneity, racism, patriarchy, cis heteropatriarchy, capitalism, ableism, and anthropocentrism are embedded in every aspect of American society. So if you're a straight white American, even if you're a very small child, you are guilty. It's your fault. You're a bad person. That's what teachers will be telling your children this fall. The teachers union ended this statement with this line, which is so hilariously revealing that it does belong in a museum somewhere, and we hope it makes it. Quote, as the ancient African proverb says, know thyself. The African proverb. Except it's not an African proverb. Know thyself is, of course, Greek, as any literate person knows. It was inscribed by the ancient Greeks in the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. But the teachers union did not know this. So not only are these people crazed ideologues, they are stupid. Your children are being taught by some of the most ignorant people in the country. How'd that happen? God knows how it happened. But you better not complain about it, or else Joe Biden's Praetorian Guard will denounce you on television as a racist.
But the former vice president tonight also joining the rest of the GOP, pushing false right-wing talking points about the teaching of critical race theory.
Gates and the other Trumpers want critical race theory to just be a foghorn. They're no more dog whistles. This is about the woke left making the white man pay for things.
Claims of reverse racism have been the bread and butter of the modern Republican Party for decades. And now they have a new boogeyman to latch on to, critical race theory.
It's a boogeyman. It's not real. You imagined it. You're crazy. Despite the fact the teachers union just spelled out in a document calling for more, yes, critical race theory. But if you notice that, if you object in any way to the current obsession with race, the one subject no normal person really wants to obsess over, then you yourself are obsessed with race and you must be stopped because you're dangerous. That's what they're saying. Not just a few of them. All of them are saying that. And as always, they're saying it in unison. So what does the average person do about this? What does it take to fight back against it? And of course, you should be fighting back against it because everything is at stake. You can't have a multiracial democracy if people retreat into their tribes and hate each other, as this curriculum teaches them to do. So what do you do? Well, whatever you do, it's going to take some courage. Daniel Concannon learned that the hard way. Until a few weeks ago, Concannon was an administrator at Northwest Elementary School in Manchester, New Hampshire. Like so many school employees, he was then forced to participate in training about the fundamental moral flaws inherent to white people. As an American and a normal person, someone who admires Martin Luther King, he objected to this. On the other hand, he, like most people, had very little power to do anything about it. He wasn't a rich person. He was making about 30 grand a year. He needed the job. But in the end, his conscience would not allow him to participate in something this poisonous. So he resigned. And if you get a minute, look up his resignation letter. It's online. He ends it this way, quote, I wish the Trotsky disciples at Manchester School District nothing but failure in their ongoing quest for civilizational degradation. I leave you with the only verbal response befitting an attempt at anti-white indoctrination. F you. Well, it wasn't so long ago that Daniel Concannon and men and women like him would have been considered heroes He's a man of conscience. He was willing to sacrifice his own job to do the right thing. But he's not considered a hero anymore. In fact, he's been effectively disappeared. You may not have heard his name until tonight. There aren't a lot of Daniel Kahn canons out there, and that's the point. The few that arise are muted so that no one will follow them. Corporate media has no interest in amplifying their stories, or the story of this guy. This man is a father who showed up at a school board meeting recently in Illinois and decided to tell a few obvious truths. Here's what he said.
You gonna deliberately teach kids this white kid right here got it better than you because he white? You gonna purposely tell a white kid, oh, the black people are all down and suppressed? How do I have 2 medical degrees if I'm sitting here oppressed? How did I get, first of all, time out, because I only got 5 minutes now, 5 minutes. 2 medical degrees, no mom, no dad in the house, worked my way through college, sat there and hustled my butt off to get through college. You gonna tell me somebody that looked like all y'all white folks kept me from doing that? Are you serious? I do this stuff on a daily basis. I'm in the hood, I'm in the communities. I'm out there with folks in their face. I've been doing stuff since I was 18 years old, talking to black folks. And you know what? None of them are buying this nonsense. And ain't not one white person ever gonna keep any of them from getting there. So the CRT stuff, BS.
Must be one of those alt-right QAnon people CNN's always warning you about. It's BS, he said. And you heard the applause in the background. The overwhelming majority of Americans, and pollsters have found this pretty clearly, think this is insane. They think you should judge people by what they do, not on the basis of their skin color. They believe in Martin Luther King. So it is BS. In fact, it's more than that. It's civilization-ending poison. But it's everywhere. How widespread is it? Well, we can't really be sure. Until we finally get cameras in the classroom, as we put them on the chests of police officers, until we finally get a civilian review board in every town in America to oversee the people teaching your children, forming their minds. And let's hope we get both of those very soon. But until we do, we can't know exactly how widespread this is. But there are indications. We know that these ideas, this poison, has made it all the way to expensive private schools in central Ohio. Columbus Academy among them. Columbus Academy, one of the most prestigious schools in the state of Ohio, tuition more than $30 grand a year per student. In the past year, Columbus Academy, which has a long history of academic excellence, has become race-obsessed. School administrators aren't working to help unwed teenage mothers or improve black neighborhoods. That might actually make the country better. If you want to talk about race, maybe you could improve someone's life, but they're not. Instead, they're doing what all guilty white liberals do. They've adopted the same familiar racist curriculum. Some people are better than other people based on the color of their skin. They've been teaching that. And a lot of parents went along with it. They didn't say a word. They didn't know what was happening, or they were too afraid to speak up. But 2 mothers decided they weren't going to have it, so they objected. Their names are Andrea Gross and Amy Gonzalez. And in January, they decided, we're going to fight this. We love the school, and we're going to do something about it. So they founded a group called the Pro-Columbus Academy Coalition, and it was Pro-Columbus Academy. They wanted to make the school better. Their mission was to stop the bigotry and return Columbus Academy to its academic mission, teaching children to read, teaching them history, showing them how to do math. But the people who run Columbus Academy didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to have the conversation. They didn't want to listen. They wanted Gross and Gonzalez to shut up and go away. But they wouldn't. When you make a mother mad about her children, it's hard to make her shut up. So last month, instead of punishing them, the school decided to punish their children. Columbus Academy kicked their 3 daughters out of school. They expelled them for what their mothers did. So challenge the regime and we'll hurt your children. The Soviets did it. Columbus Academy did it too. The school's headmistress, a confirmed mediocrity called Melissa Soderberg, sent a letter to every parent in the school explaining why she was punishing the children for the sins of the parents. But she didn't write it alone. That letter was signed by the head of the board, someone you'd think might know better, a local developer called Jonathan Cass, someone with a job, but he signed it. According to Soderberg and Cass, by daring to complain about racism in the Columbus Academy curriculum, which is real, these 2 mothers had caused, quote, pain and even fear for physical safety among students, families, faculties, and staff. In other words, if you dare to question us, we won't disagree with you. We'll attack you, we'll hurt your children, and we'll accuse you of assault. It's a physical crime. You're making us afraid. But it didn't intimidate Andrea Gross and Amy Gonzalez. They join us now, and we're happy to have them. Thank you both very much for coming on tonight. Andrea, I'll go to you first.
Thank you,
Were you, first of all, thank you for your bravery. I'm sorry about what happened to your daughters. Were you surprised that the school decided to punish your children for what you did?
Yes, I would say we were very surprised that the school decided to retaliate against our children. Unfortunately, just asking questions has resulted in our children being punished.
Amy, you would think that would be the one thing a school would never do, would be to hurt kids. I mean, you send your kids, as we all do, off for 8 hours a day in the hope that these are people looking over them. And Melissa Soderberg says, nope, I don't like your mom, so I'm hurting you. What do you tell your daughters about this? What do you tell your kids?
Well, what we've realized is it seems that our school leadership favors a tribalistic approach, and we believe in the power of an individual. So when we had to explain to our children, my daughter actually asked me, do they have a good reason to support that? Do they know who I am? I had just shared her report card with her, and she wondered if they had read her teacher's comments and how she is an advocate of the CARES program at our school. And so we just had to explain that you choose to do the right thing, and that's what moral courage is. You're trying to stand on the shoulders of truth, even if you aren't sure what the outcome is going to be.
I don't think I've seen a story that's upset me more than this in a long time. It's one thing to go after you and accuse you of assault and accuse you of being violent because they don't like your ideas. Okay, I've seen it. But to hurt your kids, Andrea, what do the other parents say? What about this guy Cass, the head of the board? He's a parent, he's an adult, he went to the school. How could he allow this to happen? How can your community allow this to happen? Seriously.
Well, I mean, I think the problem at our school is, in particular, our board. They are breaching their fiduciary duty to our entire community by failing to speak to us. This all started because we actually just wanted to come forward and have just an open dialogue of communication, and we just wanted to ask questions like, what is the curriculum? Are you teaching the 1619 project? Why did you double the diversity department but you have no learning specialists for our children 3 to 12 years old in the school? How do you get on the board of directors?
Can I stop you there? They have 3 diversity administrators, but they have no learning specialist for your kids?
Oh, they have more than that in the diversity department, but the diversity department specifically doubled this year, while our kids 3 to 12 had no learning specialists in our lower school this year, correct. So it's a choice of where are they going to allocate their finances, and we believe that the way that they do it is in a discriminatory manner because they neglect our Latino population, they neglect our kids that learn differently. There are other minority groups in our school that feel like their voices are not heard or represented. There are kids that have just even religion at our school can be a problem at times for kids that observe Catholicism. That has been an issue. So it's a tribalization, and it's to separate so that we all start to try to tear each other down, which unfortunately, that is what's happened. We have a big group of people.
What we realized early on was that our board of trustees is protecting our head of school, and so our question then became, who's protecting our children?
Right, exactly. I just gotta ask to end. Has Melissa Soderberg, who really seems like a joke, and this Cass guy, the head of the board, has either one called you to say, I'm sorry we had to punish your kids, or how are your kids doing, or where are your kids going to school next year, or how are they feeling? Has anybody reached out to you directly about your children?
No, we actually asked for an appeal, and they said we are not entitled to any documents or an appeal, and the school actually hired 2 very large law firms to represent themselves against us.
One of the attorneys from one of the large law firms is actually a board member that made the determination to expel our children.
And strangely, the head of our board is my neighbor, and I actually just walked past him the other day when I was on a walk, and I smiled, but he would not even look at me. So
I hope he's ashamed. I hope that Cass guy is ashamed of himself. Hurting people's kids because you don't like their politics, that is shameful, and I really hope they're ashamed. I appreciate your coming on tonight. It's truly an outrage. Thank you, Andrea and Amy. Thank you for your bravery.
Thank you, Tucker, so much. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So Chris Rufo is one of the only journalists in the country who's taken a close look at what companies and schools are actually teaching during these struggle sessions. And he has discovered again and again that it's racist. It's not reverse racism. It's not a species racism. It's racism. It's teaching that some people are better than others based on the way they were born, and that's immoral. Today, Rufo reported that Raytheon, that's one of the biggest defense contractors in the world, is teaching its employees to judge one another based on the color of their skin. In internal trainings, Raytheon states that white, straight Christian men are at the top of the oppression hierarchy. Those white men, Raytheon said, must, quote, step aside for minorities, though they haven't individually done anything wrong. Hard to believe this can happen, and your tax dollars are paying for it. Chris Rufo is a journalist and a filmmaker. He joins us now. So Raytheon, I guess they haven't apologized to all the people of color that their weapons have killed over the years, but instead they're attacking their own employees based on their skin color. Am I missing the gist, or is that about right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. They launched this really political indoctrination program, teaching employees to judge each other on the basis of race, asking employees actually to identify one another on the basis of race during conversations. They provided specific rules for white employees, how to speak to black employees. And they even said that employees should reject the principle of equality and favor equality of outcomes, which is a synonym for socialism, maybe communism. And it's really astonishing because this is one of the largest corporations in the world. It manufactures key defense armaments, and yet it has been captured by this woke ideology that seems to be now the dominant force, not only in education and in government, but also in business. I'm exposing it, and all Americans should be deeply concerned about what I've found.
We're always happy to talk to you. I'll just be honest with you, though. In your playtime, we tried to book the little girl, the Vietnamese girl, Napalm Girl, who in 1972 was napalmed by the defense contractors, to kind of get her take on this. Is she happy that they're woke? Have they sent her any money? I mean, for a defense contractor to talk like this, I assume it's all run by white men who are not stepping aside and giving their jobs to people of color. Is that, am I getting warmer here?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's absolutely hypocritical. You look at it across a range of companies that have been exposed with this stuff. I think the best way to think about this, Tucker, is think of it as a protection racket, similar to the mob, the mafia, where you pay a small fee. In this case, you signal virtue. You hire the right consultants. You sign the right pledges to pledge to decolonize your bookshelf or to interrogate your unconscious bias. And then these companies hope that they'll be left alone, that the kind of social media mob, that the politicians in office, that the Biden administration will keep that taxpayer money flowing because they're signaling the right beliefs. But it's transparently absurd. It's gone from a meme. Tucker, there was a joke last year that Raytheon would put the rainbow flag on a drone strike. And now that meme, that joke has become a reality. I've shown the documents, and it's really to the point of absurd. And if it wasn't so serious, everyone should be laughing.
Yeah, but you can feel good when your village gets vaporized. They're really the worst people in the world. I can say that with some confidence. Chris Rufo, great to see you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, quick news alert for you. The Associated Press has called the New York City Democratic mayoral primary, which is effectively the same as the mayor's race, given it's a one-party state in New York, and it looks like Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams is very likely to be the next mayor of New York. We are absolutely certain we will be deeply disappointed by Eric Adams. Everybody says Eric Adams has all kinds of problems. We don't agree with him on anything. But the point of Eric Adams is worth remembering. He won because he was alone in acknowledging that violent crime is a huge problem for everyone in New York, and he vowed to do something about it. That is a winning message because it's rooted in physical reality. And we wish him absolutely the best in fighting crime in New York. It's the key to saving that city. Well, across the country, violent crime is hitting record levels. So the question is, how can you protect yourself? Will you be allowed to protect yourself? The latest episode of our new long-form documentary series, Tucker Carlson Originals, meditates on that question at some length. We talk to people who have seen anarchy in the United States. Something terrible happens, the police disappear, and you have to protect yourself and your family. What happens then? We've got a clip for you up next. That happens, you call the police to save you. But what if the police don't come? Well, that's a reality that a lot of Americans are waking up to as police departments across the country have been demoralized and in some cases flat out defunded. But it's a situation that some Americans have lived through in years past. If there's a disaster of some kind, let's say a hurricane that floods your city, let's say a race riot that burns your downtown, it's up to you to defend yourself, your family, and your property. That's happened a number of times in recent years. And so for our documentary series, Tucker Carlson Originals, we took a close look at what did happen when things fell apart. We talked to Americans who survived anarchy, and we asked them how they did it. Here's an excerpt from that documentary. So things fall apart, your life is in mortal danger, the police won't protect you, and then the government prevents you from protecting yourself. That has happened repeatedly in ways that will shock you. That's a documentary worth watching, especially now. Tucker Carlson Originals, it's on foxnation.com as of today. Well, some of our elected leaders, the people supposed to be running the country, spent the 4th of July weekend reminding you that the country isn't worth anything. It's an awful place. It's not worth defending. It's not worth keeping. Missouri Congresswoman Cori Bush, for example, someone who could never have a job in the real world because she's not smart enough for a real job, complained that her taxpayer-funded gig is really a form of slavery. Quote, "This land is stolen land, and black people still aren't free." Cori Bush, however, is free to say stupid things on Twitter as much as she wants and draw a federal paycheck and have lifetime benefits for her job, wrecking the country that she hates. Maxine Waters, meanwhile, a member of Congress from California, living in a very expensive house, added this in a tweet from her mansion in LA. Quote, "The Declaration of Independence says all men are created equal." Equal to what? What men? Only white men. Right. In other words, don't celebrate the country, hate the country. Where's this going exactly? And why would the people who run the country want you to dislike it? Jesse Waters is a smart man. He's also an author. His new book is called How I Saved the World, which we're going to ask about in a minute because it needs saving. He joins us now. Jesse, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So the people who run the country are telling us two things. One, the country's not worth having. It's terrible. And two, despite being the most powerful people in the country, they're oppressed. How should we interpret this?
Well, first, we did not steal this land. We won this land on the battlefield, and the rest we purchased from the Europeans. So I don't know what Congresswoman Bush wants us to do. Are we supposed to give the Dakotas back to Crazy Horse's family? Are we supposed to give California back to Mexico? As tempting as that sounds, Tucker, it's not a good idea. Then she says blacks aren't free in this country. Blacks are free except from the Democrat Party. And many blacks have said that themselves. Then there's Maxine Waters, 1T, no relation. Notice how she always goes after the founding and just skips over the Civil War and goes right to desegregation. Why do you think she conveniently omits the fact that she's a member of a party that fought to the death to keep her ancestors in chains? They never talk about that, do they? And there's a reason for that. And I think this is the reason. The Democratic Party goes after the founding because if America is founded on slavery and inequality, the system itself, the country itself, is bad. And it needs to be corrected. Corrected by who? By the Democrat Party. So They pick at the scab. They pick at this scab. Never let it heal because they need issue to control us through guilt by association. We're supposed to feel white guilt. Blacks are supposed to feel fear, and here is the solution. And it's all psychological. Black Americans do not need to fear that they are going to be put back in chains, despite what Joe Biden has told them. There's a guy here in Manhattan the other day arrested and let out of jail 45 times. Does that sound like someone who's being oppressed? And then also, we don't need to feel guilty about something that happened in the past that we can't control. We're being made to feel guilty about some stranger's great-great-great-grandfather, something that he did. I have nothing to do with that. I don't have anything to do with what my cousin does, let alone some stranger's great-great-great-grandfather, so we can't take the bait.
I think they're basically trying to justify their own crimes. If the country is crap, then why wouldn't we just open the borders and hand our industrial base to China, right? I mean, that's like, it's not worth defending. So the country obviously has a lot of problems right now with its leadership. The world has a lot of problems, but you have saved the world. Tell us how you did that.
Well, I saved myself first. And
first man on the lifeboat.
That's where everyone needs to start, right? Because the liberals have the savior complex. They have to go about and they have to fix everybody else's problems. They need to fix their own problems first. So if we all just save ourselves, then we will save the world because, as you know, Tucker, it is my world. But in all seriousness, I did study liberals in their natural habitat. In San Francisco, I watch them behave in the wild in the Upper East Side and in Martha's Vineyard. So my stories are mostly about my observations, their insecurities, their anxieties, their fear of failure. And I talk about how they use these insecurities to justify their need to control everything, their snobbery, how that manifests itself. And we tell these stories, and a lot of them are very self-deprecating. People say I have the most punchable face in television. So if you love me or if you hate me, you will enjoy reading this book. There are a lot of juicy details about Fox and Trump.
That happens, you called.
Even myself, that I've never shared with anyone except for a paid audience.
Wow. So you're working blue in the book. I'm getting a copy right after the show. Right after the show, getting my highlighter. The great Jesse Waters, congratulations on that. Thanks for coming on. Great to see you. So we did something forbidden over the weekend. We took a look at the government's own coronavirus data. We looked at it carefully and noticed something very odd. People were dying of the coronavirus on average older than average life expectancy in a lot of places. What? What does that tell you exactly? We have those numbers for you after the break. Last 5 years, the one thing you would know about Donald Trump, the only thing you would know, the big takeaway was Donald Trump hates Hispanics and they hate him back. And because of Donald Trump, nobody with a Hispanic last name is ever going to vote Republican again. I mean, that's what the Brain Trust told us. Stuart Stevens and David Frum and all the other warmonger morons who were the intellectuals in the Republican Party. Remember that? That was the one thing. We're done. Only white people are going to vote Republican from now on. Now we have the data. What actually happened? Well, it turns out actually fewer white people voted Republican in the 2020 presidential race. Donald Trump lost a bunch of suburbanites, but he gained a lot of Hispanic voters, not just a few. In fact, in the last cycle, Donald Trump got more Hispanic votes than any Republican in history. More than John McCain, more than sensitive old Mitt Romney, even more than George W. Bush, who was always speaking in Spanish on the stump. Donald Trump never spoke in Spanish. He tweeted a picture of a taco bowl. That was supposed to be deeply offensive. Apparently it wasn't. In November 2018, Republican candidates for the House received 25% of the so-called Hispanic vote. But in November, Donald Trump took nearly 40%. So it turns out the guilty white liberals who are explaining what Hispanics really think turn out to have no real idea. So what is the answer? Why did Donald Trump increase that vote so dramatically? Pedro Gonzalez has thought a lot about this. He's an assistant editor at Chronicles, a magazine of American culture, and he joins us tonight. Pedro, thanks so much for coming on. This is the opposite of what, this is literally the opposite of what they told us was going to happen. It's way more dramatic even than I realized it was. What is this? What accounts for it?
So intersectionality hit a snag last year when predominantly Latino communities prevented BLM agitators from wrecking their neighborhoods, sometimes physically.
Exactly.
There was no white guilt here. It's not hard to understand why Latino support for Trump and the GOP has swung to Reagan and George W. Bush levels. Latinos are less welcoming of immigrants than white liberals, believe it or not. They're less apt than white liberals to attend Drag Queen Story Hour. They're less sold on the idea of diversity making the country a better place to live. They're less likely than white liberals to support defunding the police. Their communities bear the brunt of immigration policy failures, and their views are generally close to those of non-liberal whites, the GOP's largest constituency, and the people they are most eager to leave behind. But the problem is the GOP wants to use their support to justify amnesty, expanding cheap labor sources, and corporate bootlicking. Kevin McCarthy recently selected amnesty advocate and corporate Republican John Katko to lead a team of GOP legislators in coming up with solutions to secure the border. McCarthy either hates the GOP base, thinks they're stupid, or both. But here's the hard truth. Are okay with this agreement. Republicans are happy with 40% because they think it proves they're not racist. And Democrats are happy with Republicans voting 40% as long as they reliably get 60%. And we're not going to break the cycle of fleeting and false victories until we find and elect better leaders.
That is so true. Pedro Gonzalez, very insightful. White liberals make it seem like they speak for all these different groups, none of whom they've ever met before, but they don't. They don't at all. Right. And it's so nice to be reminded of that. Thank you. Great to see you.
Thank you.
So you've heard we got to get to the bottom of what happened on January 6th. Liz Cheney's all over it. She's joined the new commission. Okay, let's get to the bottom of what happened on January 6th. Nobody's more for that than we are. Who shot Ashley Babbitt? Why is the government hiding thousands of hours of surveillance footage from that day? How many cops and snitches were in the crowd as they broke into the Capitol? Let's find out, shall we? We've got some questions. We'll give them to you next.